Hello, world. What is up? Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Matt Forte. We are here live at the Build Studio in New York City. To Be of Service is a powerful documentary offering an intimate look at veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and the journey back to reclaiming their lives through the experience of working with service dogs. The film examines the real consequences of sending our brothers and sisters off to war and highlights how our best friends can help bring them home. Joining me now from the film in just a moment, Academy Award-nominated filmmaker Josh Aronson is here, and veteran Greg Kolodziejczyk is with us, and joining Greg, his service dog Valor is here as well. Make some noise for our guests real quick. I'm excited. They're going to be out in a second. We're going to have a good time. In just a moment, we'll bring them out and get started. But first, I believe we have a trailer for the film. So let's go ahead, run that clip.
Bring it. Oh, yes. Such a good girl. Such a good girl.
We are a traumatized nation. We have been at war since the beginning of our history.
It cost me relationships, it cost me love, it cost me my friends, it cost my family, almost going to jail, almost wanting to take my own life.
I've done some pretty terrible things in front of my family.
Had to take knives away from him because he used to cut himself.
I hit her so hard that it woke up my wife. She said I needed to get help or she was going to leave me.
Whatever he experienced, he brought it home.
Their answer is give me medication. Medication takes care of everything.
So they gave me lots of drugs, and my symptoms got worse. Then I got more drugs. I went to my VA and I said, I've got to do something, gotta do something. They said, well, how about a dog?
Veterans who have a service dog have lower rates of medication use for things like depression and anxiety.
My first service dog, she was like the universe coming back.
Getting my dog, getting my Timothy, it was second only to my child.
So I took medication, and I didn't want to be a zombie. Booth looked up, I looked at him, and he ran to me. That's when everything started to get a lot better.
God of mercy, God of light, save your children from this life. Hear these words, this humble plea, for I have seen the suffering, and with this prayer I'm hoping that we can be unbroken.
You're wonderful. I love you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our guests, Josh Aronson, Greg Kolodziejczyk, and Valor right here. Come on. Gentlemen, congratulations on this film. And first and foremost, Greg, thank you, as I said upstairs, not only for your service, but for being out here spreading this message and raising awareness. It's so amazing and an honor to have you here with us today. I'm so excited to talk to both of you. How you guys doing? How is life right now? How's everything going?
Well, it's pretty great because the film's just opened in New York and we're opening across the country, sort of around Veterans Day. We open in LA, and we're getting great interest from the public and the press. And John Bon Jovi, who wrote the song for the film, is pushing really hard. He's released the song and the video on the day we opened in New York. So it's been really a dream.
That's right. In New York, it's in Cinema Village right now.
Cinema Village on 12th Street. It'll be there till Thursday, I think.
Yeah. And then if you go, for those across the country, those watching live all over, if you go to Be of Service Film, tobeofservicefilm.com, you can see where it's going to be all over the place.
There's a pull-down menu and your screenings, right?
And you can see all the screenings, exactly, yeah. How did John Bon Jovi get involved? That's amazing, too. You got an original song out of Bon Jovi.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
That's a pretty big deal.
Well, we decided we wanted to have an appropriate song in the film, and one of my executive producers is very heavy in the music industry, and we talked about who would be best to do it. And I've always been a John Bon Jovi fan, and I love his voice, and he's a great lyricist. And our executive producer knew people at Universal. Evan Lamberg is the president of Universal Publishing, and he and I connected. He saw the trailer, he loved it, and he gave me a list of names. And I won't tell you the list of names. It was an extraordinary list of names, extraordinary. And we sort of settled on John, who was a good friend of his. And he reached out to John, apparently, and he said, just be patient. And I said, John Bon Jovi, right? Okay, I'm cool. And about 3 weeks later, I asked him, I said, so what's going on? Because we're cutting and we're getting closer. It's going to take a while, I'm sure. And he said, be patient. That's all he said. And I was sitting in my editing room by myself. It was late at night. I was tinkering around with something. And not late at night, appropriately, evening, right? And the phone rings. I pick up and hello? Hey, John Bon Jovi.
Called you direct.
Called me direct. And he said, great to meet you. Listen, I'm working on the song. That's the first I heard. Wow. He's working on the song, right? And he said, I need to ask you some questions. And we talked for 2 hours.
Wow.
He was fantastic. He dove in. He ultimately came over to my editing room. We looked at hours of footage and footage of him doing amazing things. And he did his work. He did his research. And the song is just beautiful. And
wow.
it's
That's really nice to hear too, because sometimes you get original song from such and such, and it's like, oh, they had a couple on file and they threw you a track and gave you the rights and whatnot. But he came over, he watched the film, he got involved, he did the research, he wrote it just for this purpose.
Didn't watch the film. We were still editing.
You're still cutting it, so he's just watching footage.
He's watching footage and scenes, and he was in the process.
That's cool, man.
He had fantastic ideas. I mean, he's brilliant guy. He's an artist.
That's
He's
really
really
cool.
special.
Wow.
And I think that scene goes there. And I was very open to him because to hear him. Well, he's a musician, but he has a sense of rhythm that's beautiful, and he understood the story really well, and it was really an honor.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, let's dive in and let's start. How did you? I know your executive producer brought you the story and said, "Take a look at this. You've got to see what's going on here." So Julie brings it over to you. When do you know this is the next movie I'm going to make?
Let me just correct you. It wasn't the executive producer. It was my co-producer. That's okay. That's okay. There are 2 executive producers. Julie Sayers is her name, and she brought me the story 5 years ago, and I said no. It wasn't for me at that time in my life. And what happened over a period of a couple of years, I moved in where I was. My mother died. I dealt with that. I dealt with who I was and what trauma was about in other parts of my life. And I realized how universal trauma is. And this is trauma on a very high level, PTSD from combat. But everybody has their process to overcome trauma to be able to function. And in the case of veterans who have therapy and meds from the VA, and ultimately, if they're really lucky, they get a service dog, those are legs on the triangle of what it takes to function and to come back into the world. And I realized that it was a powerful story, and the more I read, the more I got into it, and I was hooked, and I dove in.
Greg, for you, man, how did you decide that you wanted to be a part of it? Experiencing what you're experiencing, going through what you're going through, a difficult process all on its own. When did you decide, all right, I'm going to let a camera crew watch me too?
Well, that was a very long and arduous process. Josh sort of wooed me for quite some time. When the place where I got Valor from, Educated Canines Assisting with Disabilities up in Connecticut, they have an application process where you file a paper application, then you go for an interview. They check your medical records, and finally, when you get approved, you sign a contract and wait for the dog for about 18 months. Wow. So right after I did that, I got a call from the woman who runs the place, Lou Picard, and she asked me if I would be interested in doing a documentary, that someone was wanting to do a documentary about service dogs. And prior to that, I had a bad experience with a small sample size video from Little Things online, and I didn't really particularly like the way it came off. Yeah. So I had a bitter taste about it, and I was kind of not too happy about doing this again. And but Josh was persistent over and over. He kept laying it out for me, and then he finally invited me to his loft. And one day after VA, he lives on 20th Street. I walked over and simply sat down with him. And I don't know how many of you have seen the movie, but basically the way the movie is laid out on screen is that's how he proposed it to me. That's how he was, he already had a whole idea in head, whole laid out, and that really impressed me. And this wasn't a commercial outing. This was more of, this was done because of the subject matter, and that's really what sold it for me. So.
It's interesting that you mentioned that he showed up and he had Josh had the vision laid out already, and that's how he pitched it to you, and it's that way now. I talked to a lot of documentarians, and one of the things we hear so often is that you have your story, you have your plan, but the story evolves as you're filming, and it kind of reveals itself to you a lot of the time. If you had a specific vision in mind, how did you stay on that vision, stay on that story, but also allow for those organic things to happen?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's the question of approaching documentaries as a cinema verite, live action director, where we let reality unfold in front of us. So that's the dance. In this case, I knew I wanted a longitudinal story, which means I followed characters over time, and you hope that there's change in the characters, but you don't know. It's a roll of the dice. But I'd heard enough stories to say that when a veteran with PTSD gets a service dog, his life will improve. So that's what I was banking on. So when I finally was able to pick a number of people we filmed, ended up with only 2 in the film that we followed. When I first met Greg, you see the first scene with Greg, he's virtually, I'll let him tell the story if you want him to, he's virtually a shut-in, and he's, describes his life, and because of PTSD, he doesn't leave. He goes out at 3 in the morning to shop once a week, and then goes to the VA, and he was living by himself above his mother's house in Far Rockaway, 2 blocks from the beach, and he hadn't been to the beach in 8 years. And it was rough. So here I'm with this man who's a beautiful man, soulful man, that was obvious, but he was stuck, really stuck. So I'm banking on the fact that he's going to get a dog and his life is going to improve. So once we committed to go, we committed to film for a year. We ultimately filmed him for a year. And it was the same with another character, Tom Flood, who lives in Billings, Montana. I went to visit him before he got his dog. He was in the same shape, his own version of it, but the same shape as Greg. The first scenes of Tom in Billings, he is really rough. He's really in a tough place. And he got his dog, and within 3 weeks, he was a different person. 3 weeks, he was a different person.
That's fascinating, because you watch the film, and I understand the idea. I'm watching a year's time condensed into an hour and change, so I imagine things are going to play a little faster, but it was really that immediate. Greg, was that your experience with Valor?
Absolutely. The process with me was when once you get, the dog is fully trained and is available for you to bond with, to go up there to train with. The training was about 3 weeks, and during that training, after the first week, you already live with the dog, and you do everything with the dog. The first 4 or 5 days are orientation. Once you get bonded with this particular dog, and they approve it, that's how you take the dog under your wing, and it's all over. And then, so for the next 2.5 weeks before graduation, I already had such an intense relationship with him that I did not even believe, because we were in a rural area, wooded area, that I thought it's not going to really translate when I come home to an urban area, which was not the case. It had nothing to do with the environment. It was all about me and him and the bond, and we could walk through fire together, and it was an amazing transformation within a couple of weeks.
That's fascinating. Was that a surprise to you as well to see that?
It was a surprise to me that it was so fast. But in talking to the dog trainers and the facilitators, I learned that was the norm. That happens, the norm. It's the norm. Guys would bond with their dogs so fast, and in the film there's a scene where at the dog training facility down in Virginia, I guess, and someone says, mothers say they haven't seen their son or their husbands and wives, their husbands smile like that since before the military when they're with their dogs for within a week, because it's a dog who's just loving you unconditionally, and it's our totem animal. Dogs and humans have been together for 1,000 years. There's a deep connection.
Greg, forgive me if this is an impossible question to answer, but as someone who had tried stuff prior to Val and prior to the dog, when did you know that this was different? When did you start? Can you pinpoint when you started to feel better and feel I can do this now? I can try these things. Was there a moment where it kind of clicked for you? Yeah.
When I came home, it was for me the problem with PTSD always is that you don't want to be, you want to isolate. You don't want to be around. Everything irritates you. When you have your flashbacks and attacks in public, it's not really a pretty place to be. So eventually you just start withdrawing. He gave me the confidence to start going and doing things. There are so many programs available at the VA that I wanted to be a part of. I just didn't have it. I tried a few times and I stopped because it was just too much on me. He gave me the confidence to go and actually do them. He was there for me no matter what. he would sit there on the floor just like this during my sessions, because when he's like this, he hears me being engaged and he sees that I'm safe, and he relaxes. So, right, during the initial sessions, I would be so fidgety and everything else. He was at my lap the whole time, licking me and everything else, until he finally learned a different rhythm with me, and I learned that he was there for me all the time, and I calmed down more. And it was a process, but the confidence to do things. He is the gateway to doing things. He's not a cure-all. Yeah. He's the one that facilitates me doing things, and gives me the courage and the
If this is not too personal a question, there's a list in the film of all the mile markers for you, the things that you're working your way back towards. How's that list looking these days since the film stopped?
A lot of the things, it's progressive because they call them vivo exercises, where you expose yourself gradually, right, a little bit at a time, and then certain things I have not even tried yet. Certain things happened organically when there's someone in the audience here today that I'm in a relationship as of 2 months ago that I swore against totally, that I would have never been able to open up to someone about what's going on with me, and let alone someone understanding what's going on with me, being supportive. So there are things on that list. Basically, the way you approach it, you do one thing at a time till you get comfortable, and then you move on to the rest. And the way I prefer to do over, just like with the beach, is that I approach everything on my own first. Then I bring Valor along to just kind of solidify it, because I don't want to just kind of be hung up on the dog. I want to kind of do stuff on my own and just take that next step.
Yeah, it's amazing. Josh, your previous film, Talent for Hunger, different story, obviously, but for me, there's a similarity in that it kind of focused on the role music could play and how music can really influence or impact somebody's life. Here, we're looking at how this relationship, how these dogs can play and impact and influence somebody's life. Is that something that you find yourself looking for, like taking these things that we maybe take for granted as society and shining a light onto how important, how significant they could really be?
You know, I had lunch with a friend yesterday. He was talking about films that I'd done over the past 20 years. I've been making documentaries, and he said he saw a pattern of a theme of healing, which is what you're saying. It's interesting because it was just yesterday that someone said that to me for the first time, and you're saying this, and it's funny. I worked on a long-term music project that's been on pause now that I took this on. It's called The Soul of Music, and to me, the most interesting subjects that I found were music therapy and how music is used for healing with autistic children. They can communicate through music, through rhythms, through pain management, through lots of different things that music is used for in that way. So I never saw it as a theme, but certainly dogs as a medical modality of treatment, because people in the film, vets in the film, say it's like crutches or a prosthetic leg. Yeah. That's what a dog is to a vet with PTSD, plus the love, the unconditional love, and that's healing. So I guess there's a theme there. Yeah. Thank you for saying that.
Of course. What can, other than obviously going and seeing this film, but what are some of the resources you guys have been highlighting for people that are watching and inspired? They want to help. They want to either help spread the message or help vets get service dogs. You said it takes 18 months from when you sign the contract to get one. Is that a limitation of the system, or is that just the nature of how long it takes to train a dog and pair up? Why so long?
Over 80 commands, and depending on the, what kind of program they're in. They might be in a program for spinal injuries or for people with autism, whatever. They get trained, cross-trained in different things. The primary training is for about 60 commands. The other 20 are more kind of, whatever. Right. So it's 16 months on the low side. Sometimes it's 20 months, and depending how receptive the dog is. So, and not when from a litter that's maybe a size of 6 dogs, maybe about 4 dogs will make it to be service dogs, because some of them will not be attentive enough or too aggressive or just too all over the place. And so it's a hit or miss, but they, they don't learn the dog's capabilities up until about 6 months. So they go through that training, and at that point they evaluate it and to see what traits it has, to which program to go into.
Was Val the first dog that you worked with?
Right, well, that's another thing. When you go up there, they prepare 2 dogs for you in case you don't bond with one. So for the first 3 days, you work a morning session with one dog and an afternoon session with the other. He was my afternoon session. His sister, Swiss, was a morning session, and she was very, very hyper. And I would be just like, by the time I was done working with her by lunch, I was just like, I'm done. And then, so he was a welcome respite because he was so mellow and everything else. So it was a great balance.
Can I address the other side of your question? I think you were asking.
Yes.
Is Greg's waiting list to get the dog was 18 months.
Right.
When Greg applied, it was 18. Isn't that accurate?
That was another one.
18 months.
It's 200 people at any given time. They run 4 programs: spinal injuries, wheelchairs, traumatic brain injury like myself, and PTSD like myself. That's the 2 other programs for veterans. And there's another one for autism. And they breed their own dogs. They only have so many trainers. And it takes about 16 months to 18 months to train the dog. So by the time you sign up, I actually had an opportunity to take a dog at 9 months. They called me. A veteran couldn't come in for training. He couldn't make it. He wasn't up to it. And he passed out in the lab. I already had my heart set, and I said, you know what? Why don't you pass it on to somebody else? So there's an opportunity there maybe once in a while for shorter wait, but...
Well, yeah, so where I was starting was how do we help beyond just seeing the film? Yeah.
Well, the other problem is that the VA does not pay for the cost of a service dog. This dog is $25,000 or $30,000. That's the norm. That's the mean of what these dogs cost because of the 16 months of training and the very professional environment they're trained in. So that means that the veteran has to either come up with the money through family and friends and crowdfunders or whatever, different ways you can do that, or get scholarships or however. So those people who are doing that have to come up with the money, and there are certain places you can go and pay for a dog. There's a lot of places that are funded by individuals and foundations who care about vets and love dogs and recognize how important it is. Well, the problem is how many vets want those dogs. So because there's only a limited number of dogs, and because there's a waiting list, and because the VA isn't paying for them, it's a sometimes 2 to 3 year wait for vets who need one now. They really need it when they need it because it's life-changing. It's really powerful what the change is. So what we're doing with the film is we're really pushing very hard to get Congress to complete the bill called the PAWS Act and some other bills as well that first started with Al Franken in 2011. He put it up. And the PAWS Act is a law that would mandate that the VA pay for service dogs for veterans with invisible injuries of PTSD and moral injury and so on. They'll pay for the dog for veterans in a wheelchair, veterans who are deaf, veterans who are blind, but not for veterans with PTSD. And they won't do it. They've done a multi-year study that they kept starting over and over and over again because they had problems, and they've completed it, but they have not announced any results and say it's still a year away. So we're doing a screening in Congress in November, and we've got a lot of people who are behind this to come, and we're going to be walking the halls of Congress for 2 days with veterans, with their dogs who are in the film. Greg, we were talking about it. Greg might be able to come as well. So we'll have 4 of our vets with service dogs going to congressmen's offices telling about the benefits of dogs. And we've made 600 DVDs, and every congressman and every senator will get one, and we're doing everything we can to sort of mandate that the VA pay for them.
Josh, this is so much more than just a film for you, isn't it?
Yeah,
Man?
it is.
Yeah, you
It
can
is.
tell.
Thank you.
Well, you're doing God's work, man. It's unbelievable. I can't imagine anyone watching this movie and not feeling compelled to, in some way, help. So I will further be an optimist and assume the best and hope the best. And in the meantime, for those watching everywhere, like I said, if you go to Be of Service Film, there's some great resources there as well to direct you and help you to make an impact from wherever you are in the world right now. Gentlemen, congratulations. We're going to take some audience questions before we get out of here, but it's absolutely amazing.
Can I just say for people in Los Angeles, because that's our next big opening.
That's the next big one, yeah.
Yeah, we open on November the 8th. Okay. We open for a week in Los Angeles at the Laemmle Music Hall on Wilshire. And come out and support the film. It'd really be great to see you there.
November the 8th, Laemmle Wilshire Music Hall.
Yeah. And I'll be at the 7:30 screening on Friday the 8th and the 9th. And we have some of our vets on the West Coast who are coming to that screening. I don't know, maybe after this Greg will fly out. I'm not sure. He's enjoying this.
It's amazing, man. Yeah. Again, it's so great to have both of you here. Truly an honor. Kate, how many we got? At least 2? That's perfect. Let's go. So we got to get a microphone right in the back. Do it up.
You mentioned it's a 16-month process for these dogs to be trained. What do they have to do in those 16 months?
All right, so, in the very beginning, they started about 4 weeks, and they start separating from the litter from the other puppies being individual. They start individual training, so all that separation, that pet-like behavior gets, bred out of them. And then they start doing certain, small little, follow-on exercises, like, just basic behavioral, just to sit, kind of like lay down. So there's a connection, a bond between the trainer. And then from that point on, at a certain point, they go and spend 3 months in a female penitentiary in Connecticut. And those women, there's a program there that those women train the dogs. with commands and stuff like that. During the summers, they run children's camps. The children come in and learn about the animals and learn how to help them learn how to be groomed and how to be behave well and all that kind of stuff. Like little small basics. And then the other stuff is basically individual. There's a lot of individual work, and the thing is, what they do is they try to mix in every other day a different trainer, and they'll go over the same kind of exercises. This way, it's different trainers. Then for a little while also, they go at a certain point after a lot of intensive training, probably around 9 months, they get a little break. They go to these foster homes where these people are trained. They still go over the certain commands and stuff with them, but not as extensive as before. They kind of get like a little break. And then they come back and they go into the specialized training and everything else.
It's a great question. Greg, what was, because we see some of the amazing things that these dogs can do in the film, was there a command or a skill that Valor had that you were yourself even surprised by? You're like, oh my God, I can't believe Valor.
Oh, there's something. I mean, they'll do laundry, they'll bring stuff from the lower cabinets, that kind of stuff for people that are, a little bit more physically disabled. For myself, what it was that I get nightmares at night, and I haven't slept in the bed in a long time up until the point I got him. He was taught to, when I have a nightmare, he'll come over and just start gently licking me on the neck first. If I don't respond, he'll lay across my pelvis and roll. And he constantly, to check in with me, he constantly licks me, like at home, so I don't zone out or have a flashback. He'll come in and say, if I don't respond in a certain way, another thing is that he'll never get up on my knees without my permission. So, but he'll get up and he'll start licking me, in my neck till I respond. So he's got these. He knows. He's checking in constantly. Yeah. Right.
That's amazing. Kate, can I do one more? Yes, please. One more question. You should have a microphone. Come on down.
Thank you so much for coming to talk to us today. I just wanted to ask, what was the most hopeful and uplifting moment for you guys personally during the whole process of making the film and learning about this?
Well, I mean, let me just say, I'm blessed through this whole process. It became such a big part of my treatment, and I've grown so much through it. But the thing was, for me, was when I graduated, the class I graduated with was 6 other people, 2 people in wheelchairs, an autistic child, women with brain injury like myself, and to go through them with them when they first come in for orientation and seeing how broken we all were. And then within weeks working with these dogs at graduation, the change. I mean, I made a speech at graduation. I couldn't even make it because I was crying the whole time because, it was just tremendous to, name everyone by name and say, what kind of advances they've made. And it was just tremendous. And we are all still in touch with each other. And also, seeing these veterans, all my other brothers and sisters who go through this, it's just to see the growth in them and the hope from this whole process. There's hope. There wasn't hope before. Now there is, there's more exposure, and that's really what warms my heart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if you wanted to share a moment from the production or not that filled you with
Well,
hope.
I've told this story the other night. I was out in Phoenix at a dog conference of a dog organization, and 200 people were there, and they asked a lot of questions, and then someone put up their hand and they said, what was the most touching thing? What was the most impactful moment in this whole thing? And oddly enough, it was after the production. One of the vets in the film had a dog who'd had a dog for 4 years. I didn't follow him, but he'd had the dog for 4 years. Wonderful guy, a wonderful dog we filmed. And the dog got cancer and he had to put him down. So to watch the devastation in his life, it was catastrophic. And so it was such a perfect example, a horrible example, but the example of what the meaning is of this relationship, of what this bond is, and how healing it is. Because he regressed back to the way he'd been before he got his dog. He'll get another dog and he's going to be okay. He came to one of our screenings the other night. But it's been about 2 months, and it took him that long to sort of come back and get balanced again. And he's going back out to his dog trainer to get another dog now. And it was just such a visceral way of seeing how vitally important these dogs become to their handlers.
How deep that connection is rooted.
Yeah.
Well, the film, I said it once, I say it again, it's fantastic. The stories are amazing, and it's an honor to have you here, Greg, and thank you for sharing your story and getting out here and spreading this message and telling people about it. And thank you for making the film and helping spread this word as well. tobeofservicefilm.com. Go look up all the different places you can see it. In the meantime, everybody, please do me a favor. Make a ridiculous amount of noise for Josh Aronson, Greg Kolodziejczyk, and Valour for being here today. Come on.